let's get going here. So thank you everybody for coming to this event. This is another one of our, as we say, BRAIN acronym, AI related workshops. BRAIN is the acronym we use for building readiness for AI navigation. So we try to put on at least one event per month at Foothill College to give people and the community opportunities to learn about AI related topics. And so this is the one we're putting together for our March session. And the two people who will be presenting here today is Robert Cormia, who is a chemistry faculty member at Foothill College, and he's a very well-versed AI user. He can explain more about that when he talks. And then Ben Kaliczak is actually alumni from Foothill College. Ben took courses with me actually when I was teaching, and he is an AI expert as per his job in the real world. And so he brings a lot of expertise into this space that he can share with us. So I want to first thank you, Robert and Ben, for being willing to put this event together. I'm here to help facilitate when needed, but really the platform is you two at this point. So I'm going to hand it off to you two, and maybe you can introduce yourself just a little bit more if you'd like, and get the show going.
Robert, do you want to kick it off first?
Sure. Thank you, Ben. I'm Bob Cormia. I teach in chemistry. I've been at Foothill for, believe it or not, nearly 25 years full time and have been in STEM related fields, web technology. I always had a passion for information technology. And with the AI group being formed with Zach and Sharon leading that effort, been involved in a number of discussions. And last fall, we said we should have a meeting on Sharon suggested prompting for success. And so here we are. And I met Ben through that effort and super thrilled to have him presenting.
Cool. So I am Ben Kaliczak. For a good chunk of my life, I was a professional jeweler, and I went back to school to Foothill for a double associates for transfer for computer science and statistics, and that I finished over at Berkeley. And now I lead teams of data analysts and data scientists at a company in the Bay. I use LLMs and AI tools a lot in my work and also a lot in my free time in personal projects outside of work. And I'm very happy to be putting time back into Foothill because I had a lot of people, including Zach, help me on my way up when I was coming back into school. Let me kick off with the first section of this. So I'm gonna try to make all of this as low technical barrier to entry as possible, but there are two concepts that are a little bit on the technical side that I think are really important for people to understand when they're engaging with these tools. The first one is differentiating words versus tokens. When you're using tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, what have you, you're most likely going to be putting in some kind of text request or maybe even an image, maybe a PDF file. For the most part, the way that we perceive interacting with these tools is giving it some kind of like typed request, so a collection of words. But most of these tools don't use words under the hood. They're going to use things called tokens. So here's an example of me sending a input and getting an output. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy and it replies dog and some flavor text afterwards. If I go to OpenAI's token estimator, which I'll have linked at the bottom, it'll show me how many tokens are in a piece of text that I sent it. So right here, we have 13 tokens. And if I look at a breakdown of it, you can see each of those tokens and how they're broken up across the words. The smaller words are usually one token with the preceding space before it. And then in Texarkana, it's broken up into 3 tokens. For my original example, I was using Texas, but it was using Texas as a single token. But if you look at the bottom, this is what's actually getting passed into the model under the hood that you don't really interact with. A series of numeric tokens are getting passed through into the inner workings of OpenAI, Claude, Gemini. And what the model is doing, it's predicting the output based on the tokens that are passed as the input. So with this, the tokens I passed were the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy, and the most likely output that the model predicted was dog, and some flavor text was probably also added with other things they have under the hood. With that out of the way, the next thing that I want to talk about is context window. So the context window is how many tokens these models can hold in its memory. And that includes the input, the prompt that you're sending, the output that the model is generating, and also the instruction set that either is given if you're fine-tuning these models, or if like OpenAI or Claude gives to these models that you don't really see. So any kind of safeguards that are built into the prompt, that's going to be part of the context window. And if you send a large corpus of text, let's say like an entire book that you want it to analyze, all of those tokens are going to count against the context window. So if you have experience with these models, you've probably run into an experience where you feel like some of the fine details are getting lost in the longer conversations. And that's happening because the way in which many of these models will allow for the conversation to keep going while maintaining the limits of that context window is there will be some kind of summarization that's happening for the whole conversation. And I found a good visualization of that. So the red box is representing the context window, and the black bars outside of that is kind of getting trimmed out. And what happens is, let's say that you're just having a back and forth with one of these models to talk about a trip that you had to Nevada, and you want to go in detail with every experience that you had and have it write up a summary of your trip at the end. If you hit the context window, it might be able to capture the overall experience that you're trying to convey. But if some of those really specific fine details are lost in the summarization, that can often happen when you bump up against the context windows. Thankfully, many of the models that are out right now have rather large context windows. So if we look back at the sentence that I put at the start, this has 13 tokens for a short little sentence. Most of the larger models have at least 100,000 tokens. Gemini has 1 million tokens. Claude has 200,000, and most of the GPT models have about 120, maybe 150,000 tokens. So unless you're doing very long conversations or giving an enormous amount of context, you probably won't bump up against that window for shorter tasks, shorter conversations. But if you have had this happen to you, if you tend to be someone who only goes through one message thread because you want it to remember everything, you might want to start creating new message threads or new message threads when you want to do one-off requests. Cool. Before I jump into the basics, I'm gonna tag over to Bob.
Yeah, thanks for laying that introduction, Ben. In my introduction, I probably should share that we are trying to encourage students to use large language models to help them in learning. And one of the things that I picked up very early into my now 2 years experience with this is the importance of laying context, direction, and intent when you do a prompt, a structured prompt, so that the model really understands context, who you are, the task, what you're doing, but the why it's important and putting all three together. In preparing for this meeting, Ben and I had a number of conversations of where that's important in real use. And before we get into really importance of zero shot, few shot, chain of thought, reasoning, tree of thought, is always to think about what we're doing. We're having a conversation with a reasoning engine, right? It's like, oh, great Oracle. And when you're having this conversation with intelligence, it's important that it understands who you are so that alignment is tight.
Yeah. Hi,
So
Mona. Hey.
then back to you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So there are many different types of prompting. I'm only gonna cover two types in this presentation. But in one of the links that I have at the end, it'll go. There are much deeper dives into each type that also gets pretty technical. But the two types that I'm going to go over are zero shot and what I'm calling conversation building. These are probably the two types that most people will gravitate towards. So zero shot is often you have one prompt and you're looking for either a very quick response, or your prompt is formatted in a way that you just need one specific output. You don't need to iterate or refine on it, and you're just going to abandon the conversational thread afterwards. On the other hand, conversation building is you have a much larger problem, or you don't really have the specifics of the output that you want, and you need to iterate it on it a few times. And I'm going to go over some examples of each. So for zero-shot prompting, I have this give me a 2-sentence description of what a 5-paragraph essay is. I don't really need any more than that. I don't need it to break down the history of 5-paragraph essays. I just want one thing, and I don't really want to Google it. Here's another example. State the 5 laws of algebra and a 1-sentence description of what each is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pretty succinct. I don't really have any follow-up iterations on it. So this method can be very helpful. And what you'll find when you start going between the two is you might create a prompt at the end of a conversation building message thread that you then use for zero-shot prompting. So let's say that you're trying to create a couple of templates for a new note-taking system. It might take a little bit of iteration, but you finally have exactly what you want. And then you might use that in zero-shot prompting to have it fill in details for you. So in this, I'm doing exactly that. I want to create a do template for my day-to-day notes. I want it to be lightweight, extensible, and formatted with Markdown. So in this is the first output it gave me. I say this is a good start. Let's add a section at the top of first thoughts to capture anything at the top of the day, separated by a dividing line. Change meetings to plan, no subheadings. Let's also have an end of day section. So if you'll notice that it didn't actually give me exactly what I wanted. So I had a section of first thoughts, and I asked for it to be separated by a divider. But I didn't say that I want the divider separating first thoughts from the rest of the content. I just said separated by a divider. And this is a really good example of we might take things for granted in the way that we word requests that might be very straightforward if we're talking to people. But with these kinds of language models, you need to be very specific in each of your requests. And sometimes it can be a lot more straightforward to kind of iterate on these things rather than typing out an enormous amount of instructions yourself. Because if I had gone through and every single one of my requests in the original prompt, I probably would have spent a lot more time building that original prompt than I did in just iterating back and forth with this model. So at the end, I have this this template that I think will work really well for me, but I want to have it in raw markdown that I can copy into the note-taking app that I use. So I ask for the output to be converted to markdown, put into a code fence so I can copy and paste it really easily, and then that's good to go. And so now I'm going to touch on what template making is. So if you're at the end of a conversational building thread, you might want to capture all of that work without having to do it again. So if you've gone through and created a template for something or a workflow for something that you really like, but you don't really want to have to go through that kind of back and forth exchange, you can give yourself a little shortcut for new conversational threads with a fresh context window. And with that, you can use templates. Both OpenAI and Claude are pretty good at taking this kind of request, so asking it to summarize the conversation, specifics of formatting that I like, and the end conversation output requirements in the form of a prompt I can use in other conversations with LLMs. And what it does is it gives me this prompt. And so I can take this prompt, and if I want to use this as a starting point for something else, let's say that I really like my day-to-day templates, but I want to expand on it and make a week over week or monthly or quarterly templates, I can use this as a base point in a new conversational thread, and then at the bottom say, take this as a starting point, and I want to make a new template with these similar formatting requirements, but I want to have it for a monthly view or a monthly notes. You can use this kind of workflow with any task that you have with LLMs. Before I go into learning versus generating, I'm gonna tag Bob back in.
Yeah, Ben, thanks so much for connecting the template building with the conversation, because so often we have these dialogues with a large language model and we get to a point and it's like, I want to do it again. And you try it again and you don't get quite the same answer. And it's like, what happened? And I've done this in trying to prepare academic Senate minutes. I'm doing this with a task with our curriculum and apprenticeship programs. And the template building is really essential for consistency and probably gives you some insights into improvement, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Quick question, Ben, can you export a template from one model to the other, and what might the results be?
Yeah, so if you have ever bounced between different providers or models like ChatGPT, Claude, Google's, or any others or any self-hosted, you'll notice that, or you'll probably realize that you can ask the exact same question of each one, and the output is going to be different between model to model, even within the same model. And so while it will help out, the nuances in the output might be a little bit different from model to model in general, but having a template will really trim down on the variance between working with them. So if I know that Claude is much better at code generation, but ChatGPT is much better at like abstract planning, I might use ChatGPT to create an outline or a template that then I use in Claude to generate code for something that I'm working on.
Great, thank you.
All right. So one thing that I wanted to spend a bit of time on was going over the difference between using these tools for learning versus using these tools for generating. And I think that I use LLMs every day in a lot of the work that I do. And it can be really easy to rely on them in really profound ways and just take the output as a source of truth. But if you've used them for anything especially technical, you'll notice that there are often inconsistencies that you can easily tweak, you can easily fix, but if you don't understand the output it's giving, it can be really hard to catch those inconsistencies. So I especially for anyone who is learning or skill building, in school, out of school, if you're trying to use these tools to learn something, you want to make sure that you approach the problem as a learning assistant rather than a problem solver, because you won't generate the muscle memory of solving problems by just having these tools solve them for you. But with that pretext out of the way, I wanted to go through a couple of examples of how to use these tools in different learning scenarios. So right here, I'm a first-year computer science student. I'm currently learning about functions, and I'm really struggling to understand local scope versus global scope when it comes to variables. Can you break it down for me? So in this example, like Bob was saying, it's very important to give the context of you as a user and what knowledge you know. The more context you're able to give, the better the higher quality the output and the more valuable it will be to you from where you're coming from. If you're trying to learn a basic concept, you might need it explained in a different way than if you're trying to refresh yourself as an expert in the field. So in this example, it gives me both written description and a code example of learning global versus local scope for functions. I'm a first-year college student. It's been a while since I was in a classroom, and I'm starting to write papers in my English class. Something that I'm struggling with is taking content that I research and choosing parts of it that would be helpful for building a compelling paper. What are some methods I can use to plan out and structure a research paper? Um, if you hear some of the examples I'm going over, and many of them are just things that I was thinking about that I went through as a student, because I went back to school when I was 28, 29, and it had been a long time since I'd been in a classroom. So here, it gave me a step-by-step or 8 different bullet points of methods that I could use in helping to structure a research paper. And what I would do if I resonated with any of them that I wanted to dig down in, I'd say for number 2, let's say I didn't know what the funnel method is. I'd say take number 2 and break it out for me in a way that I can understand. Say I don't really understand what you mean by general overviews with Wikipedia and textbooks. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? And so really dig down into the output, ask for clarifying points to help with this kind of brainstorming activity. So this is one that came up from Bob and I talking yesterday. I have a statistics and computer science degrees, but I'm interested in starting to learn about chemistry. I've always felt uncomfortable and uncertain about chemistry and biology, so I'm looking for a place to start. Can you start by giving me 3 options of basic starting points for where to start learning foundational chemistry concepts? And so it gives me 3 starting points. The last 2, this is completely true, by the way. The last 2 look a little bit scary to me, so I'm like, okay, number 1, I could start. Let's start with number 1. Can you break it down into 3 starting topics? And let's create a 3-week roadmap where I could spend 10 to 20 minutes a day reading about a topic or a concept in each of those 3 weeks. And then it gives me the starting topics for week 1. And then the second part of the output is a day-by-day breakdown of those topics in each of those kind of like overarching topics. If I looked at this and said, that is terrifying, let's just stick with the atomic structure over all of the 3 weeks, I would ask it to rework it to break it down further. So it's just the atomic structure, just the entry level over those 3 weeks. And then I could use that as a roadmap. I've done something very, very similar with other technical skills that I needed to learn for things on the job that I had no experience with. Just approach it give a context of what your skills are, what you're trying to learn. And I really like having these tools build myself a roadmap because it takes a lot of the boilerplate work out of it. You can just take this plan that these tools have built for you and either use them wholesale or iterate on it in something that works for you. Before I get into the next part, I'm gonna tag Bob back in.
Thanks, Ben. Perfect timing. So last summer, end of, I don't know, beginning of August, I'm finishing up my Chem 30A class, and I'm thinking about my students going into Chem 30B in organic chemistry. And it's like, I really wanted to continue to tutor them, right, Zach? I wanted to sort of up my game and increase my chemistry. So I went to GPT and I said, hey, GPT, I'm an intro to chemistry instructor. A lot of my students go on to organic and biology or biochemistry. And I feel like it's been, my gosh, decades since I've done this topic. So here are some basics things that students learn in this course. I'd like to learn a little bit more about helping them with chemical reactions, right? Structure I have down, functional groups and moieties pretty good, but I've always struggled with reactions and moving electrons. Can you give me a starting point, right, of maybe 3 or 4 different reaction types, how I can work through these, and then, as Ben said, let's build a 3, 4, 5, 6 week program, and then some checkpoints, and I'll check in and see where we are. And presto, there it was. With references, by the way.
That's fantastic. So for this next example, this is definitely some like a little bit more of a complicated task that I'm working through. But I thought that it would be really helpful for hopefully at least some of the people that are here today, whether they're students or professors or admins, is I went through some of the degree programs that Foothill has. I went to the dental assisting program, and I just got this one sheet PDF program map that you can get on here. And I downloaded the PDF. I sent the PDF into the prompt. I sent the link to the program as well. Here's this dental program I'm considering. I work part-time and really want to plan out what kinds of things I might want to study before my classes start or before each class. And then, is there a gateway test that I might need to take after this certificate? If so, are there any specific concepts in each class that I really need to make sure that I understand fundamentally? And for a lot of these larger programs, there are gateway tests that you might, as a student, you might just think, I need to get through this course. I just need to get to the next one. But you might let some of those concepts slip that you're really going to need to know for that one thing that'll get you into the industry.
Yep.
So right here, this is a lot, but it gave me a chunk of planning study before classes start. It let me know that there is a gateway test, the registered dental assistant exam. Oop. The exam components and key concepts for each of the classes that I would want to really master. I am a oh, and then excuse me, also study recommendations. I'm a very kind of like visual and spatial learner. I really like making flowcharts and graphs, especially for like larger planning tasks. So I asked if it could make me a flowchart using Mermaid IO, which is a completely free flowchart maker with like a kind of a written syntax. And so it took everything that it gave me and gave me this big old chunk of code. And then I went over to Mermaid.io and I had it plug it into a flowchart. So this is a real story. When I was at Foothill, I used a different mind mapping tool to plan out my classes semester by semester. And if I had this, I probably would have saved myself hours and hours and hours of work, because what you can do with this is you can grab the data from Foothill's site wholesale. You can print out each page to PDF, all the course descriptions. You can plug it in here to really get a deep dive of what are the concepts in each of the classes, for each of the classes, what's the roadmap that you need for a degree, a certificate, any kind of transfer path that you have. And then you can visualize it or output in any way that works for you. And that last part is the most important part. If you look at this and you're like, this looks like a whole bunch of nonsense, then you don't need to use this at all. You can take this bullet point, you can handwrite it, you can transform it any way that works for you. And I think that this is the most powerful aspect of these tools, is you can have it restructure and reword any of this boilerplate text into a format that is how you learn or how you function in your organization. So here, I think this might be one of my last prepped examples that I have. So I say that I'm a college student and I'm struggling with some specific aspects of note taking. I feel like I can take good, although messy, handwritten notes during lectures. I can even use them for like adjacent projects and studying for exams. But what I would really like is the ability to incorporate them into a larger body of overall notes that I can reference after classes end and still gain value from. I've tried setting up these grand note-taking systems before, and I find that I spend more time setting them up than sticking with them. Are there any suggestions that you can make for some things that might help? This is real. This is straight from the chest. I struggle with this a lot, both at Foothill and in Berkeley. And so it gave me a bunch of really helpful bullet points to work for. I have tried Notion. I actively use Obsidian. I used Obsidian at Foothill, Berkeley, and I use it a lot for my job. Very, very strong recommendation. And then also Google Docs or OneNote, if those work for you. Low effort review process, simple tagging system. And with these, I have the ability to dig into it or even refine. It's like, oh, I've tried a tagging system. I don't think that'll work. Can you suggest some other methods that might be helpful in similar ways, but that I can try to see if it works for me? If you are finding that the structure of your life or your time organization is one of your weak points, then you can use this as a personal assistant, as a project manager, as a stand-in for having to seek out that help if you either don't have those resources or don't feel comfortable in asking for it. This is a wonderful tool to use. I have links to any of the things that I went over. This is the more technical prompting guide. And I wanted to tag Robert back in and then also have time for any Q&A that folks might have, or to walk through any examples or example problems that someone is really interested in.
Thanks, Ben. That was a great, deep overview, and I've learned so much from you in the span of just 24 hours. I want to share with you as an instructor where you can use large language models. And as we know as faculty at our college, but probably everywhere, that everyone has a different experience with AI, and we have different knowledge of it, different skills, and maybe passion for it, or maybe fears of it. And what I say to my class is, I want you to learn, I want you to see how these tools can help you learn and become more successful. So as an instructor, any instructor, but often in chemistry, a student will ask a just out and left field question, right? Something involving orbitals, right? Or something involving, do electrons have color? And you think for a minute and it's like, well, that's a really bizarre question. Or maybe that's an interesting question, but I don't have an hour to talk about it. Come to an office hour, and instead we turn it into a prompt. We say, all right, guys, context, direction, and intent, right? I'm a chemistry student. I'm new to this field. We're in atomic theory. And I'm trying to figure out how the heck do these shapes come? Why are s orbitals spherical? Why are pi orbitals angular? Why are d orbitals cloverleaf? And I've seen all over the map. And I really don't get why the 3D orbitals come after the 4s, or the 4s come before the 3D. Can you help me understand that? And it's just, I tell students, you really need to bare your soul with a model and tell it what you think and where you're vulnerable, because that alignment is going to get the model to work with you on an individual level. And it's perfect for exploratory learning. It's perfect for the kind of question that maybe you don't understand on the fly that someone's is asking. It's a really important question to them. So let's help build this prompting skill. The second one I want to mention is not related to academia, but again, a true story. My landlord's kid, Trevor, just finished his first job as an energy professional. He worked there about 2 years up in Folsom, got tired of it, came back to the Bay Area, and he says, Bob, I need you to help me. You've mentored me in energy before. Can you help me sort of understand these companies and whatnot? And he said, I'm exploring one company. I said, okay, Trevor, now we're going to do derivative works. And so you're going to use your language model and you're going to upload a set of documents. The first will be your current resume and what you think your knowledge and skills and abilities are. The second, you need to upload a link to your former employer and what they do about that company for context. The third is the target company about that company. And then the fourth is you're going to upload the current positions of the target company that you're looking at. Instead of asking, not just how do I prepare for this interview, ask yourself two things. Could I do these jobs? And if not, what could I do for this company based upon what I've done before, what I have a passion for, and what I'd like to do? And then secondly, how might I grow at this company? Those are two questions that come up in an interview to younger employees, especially. What can you do for us? But how do you want to grow? And so the ability to think that through is really important. And the second one is I do a lot of complex writing. I've written complex articles, put together patents, put together proposals, which are always very complicated, very complex workflows. Multiple stakeholders are involved, and you have to understand the writing process. But if you get your folder set up with your drafts, with your ideas, with an outline, with a summary of where you think you want this writing project to go. And then one thing I learned in an early prompting class is upload these documents, including what you think you are writing, and ask the model, tell me what you think I'm writing. And if there's a mismatch there, then maybe you haven't really prepared for what your target is. And in doing that complex writing effort, these large models are very important. I used it for academic senates, minutes. I upload agendas, my meeting notes, and the voice transcription file. So I want, Ben and I have we've used these models, and Ben especially, for a lot of different types of projects. Think about it as more than a search engine. Think about it even as more than I'm interacting, creating a dialogue with an intelligence. How can I upload documents? How can I do a literature search and say these 3 articles, all written at different times in an area that I'm interested in? Can you create a composite document for me? Can you create a composite list? And then back to studying, can you create a vocabulary list? I'll mention one more, and I did this with one of my students, again, progressed to another course. And she said, I have a practice exam. And I looked at it and it's like, I don't know half this stuff. But let's do this. We'll take each of the 8 questions. It was multiple choice with an answer. You had four answers for potential. And you're going to upload these questions one at a time to the model. You're going to upload the answers and then tell the model what you think is the correct answer and why, and then ask the model to explain why the other answers are incorrect, and then synthesize that into an understanding. And I guess, Ben, what we're talking about is you called a persistent dialogue, right? That you're having with these models, the importance of doing that, creating a resource at the end of this effort. What did you learn? And then the ability to move on from that. But I really hope that teachers and instructors don't see these tools as threats. Any person, and especially a student, that has a gateway to intelligence, reasoning, and creativity, if we give them guidance and give them some structure and give them maybe some tasks, right, and some feedback, that we can help them succeed, and then collectively as an organization we'll do better.
So that was great. That was great, Bob. I wanted to bounce off that last thing you said for any instructors that are here or anyone who might help some friends in learning to use these tools. I definitely have found that the more I know about a subject, the better I am at asking questions of Google, AI tools, or even just working on a project. And the thing that students often struggle with is it's not that they're deficient in the way that they're learning or understanding a concept. It's they often don't really know what questions to ask that'll help them to get the answers that they're looking for. So if you're a professor, if you're someone helping someone learn with these tools, one of the best things that you can give is advice on the types of questions to ask these tools in like this learning assistant workflow of if I didn't know how to ask the question about the how to structure research in a research paper. If I just said, "Help, I'm in trouble. I have to write a research paper. I don't even know where to start," it probably would take me a little bit more time to get to the point where I am actually able to get value from it. So helping people understand what questions to ask, what things they might be struggling with in understanding can really help in using these tools to kind of push through those things. Um,
And then I
I
just want to comment, that's a huge differentiator, isn't it? Learning workflows. It's like, where do we learn that? Do we learn that in academia? Do we learn it professionally? Does someone guide us through this? But boy, a tool, when I wrote this idea for a patent, I just uploaded the ideas, I uploaded an article, and then I said I asked the model, do you think I have a protectable idea here? And it said, yes, let's sketch a way for you to do this. And you're asking the model, tell me what to do. Tell me, how to prepare myself. And you do this, I don't know, 2, 3, or 4 times, and you get the hang of what does a workflow look like when you've got a complicated learning space, complicated documents, and multiple stakeholders.
So I have there's a question in chat. Someone was asking if I use Obsidian. I do. I really will not stop evangelizing Obsidian. It's completely free. It's all written in Markdown, which is kind of a decorative like pseudo code that you can like one hash mark for heading one, two hash marks for heading two. I gravitated toward this program because I was finding that I was going over the same concepts in a bunch of different classes, and I was just taking the same notes over and over and over again instead of building up on the same concept from a couple of different points of views. Like if you're learning about derivatives in a math class, and then you're going over to a computer science or statistics class, and then using derivatives over there, you might want to add to that single concept from the points of views of straight math, stats, or computer science.
Then I wanted to ask a question, and you helped me think through an important scenario yesterday. So when I write, I often, if I'm trying to figure out what to write, I'll write about an idea probably 3 different times, 3 different ways. I'll end up with 12 paragraphs, and I'm still only trying to do 3 things, right? And I might put some meta tags on top of those paragraphs, and then upload it to a model and say, this is what I'm struggling to explain. Am I anywhere near it? Can you help me combine these pieces, right? Because that's the last bit when you have all this writing and you want to put it together. But Ben and I, in the discussion yesterday, came and he helped me think through a real world scenario. I have a chemistry student in a writing class who was accused of using an AI model. She asserts that she didn't, right? And we're trying to think through how it might have happened. And Ben suggested, well, maybe she used Grammarly at some point. But then here's my question. If you're using these models to help you create just a draft to organize your thinking, and it leaves, I don't know, what does the machine coding signature look like in this document so that these AI detectors that some of our faculty are using is picking that up? And are we creating, in using these tools, are we creating scenarios that are going to back students into academic integrity conflicts?
That is
That was a long question.
a very, very good question. And I think it might take us more than 13 minutes to answer that. Um, I wanted to open it up to anyone who's here if they had a specific question regarding either LLMs, OpenAI, Claude, what have you in general, or if there's a specific task that they're interested in using these tools for, or anything in between.
Zach, I might reach out and ask you a question. Sort of heading up
Me?
yeah,
Oh,
our AI learning community.
I
I'm
actually got a question.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I got a question. If you can use this to grade essays, and I think that you can use this to do most things, but there's a couple of really, really important caveats, right? So if you take an essay, if you go to ChatGPT and you say, I am a professor or I'm a TA and I'm grading essays, right? And I have this very specific rubric against which to grade the essay. I think that you can use this as an assist, but it shouldn't be the source of truth. Because very similarly to when we were talking about the context window, unless you're able to give very, very granular instructions for every single point in a grading rubric, you might inadvertently get the output saying that you should dock this student points without it fully understanding what you're looking for. If you're looking for a critical analysis of a social topic, it might not have the context to fully appreciate the point of view of either the topic itself or the analysis, because these models are often trained on data that's a few years old. So if you're having a student analyze a very recent event, it might not be appropriate to give an analysis on that event for a model that doesn't have the context of that. So it's like you can, but with the larger AI detector conversation, it shouldn't be the source of truth for your decisions. It should only be an aid in the tasks that you're working on.
I think, yeah,
Yeah.
Rachel's asked a really good question about alignment.
That is a perfect segue. So, what you can do is when you're comparing two corpuses, when you're comparing two bodies of text, instead of saying, does this one fit the other? A much better use of these tools is, can you highlight overlap and differences between these two? Because then you'll get a much better overview and drill down of the model's output than if you would just say, does this fit the rubric? Because you can prompt a model in a way that will get you to any conclusion that you want. If you give an essay that you would give a perfect 10 out of 10, and you say, give me 5 reasons why this essay shouldn't get an A, it'll give you a response. It will almost never give you a response of this essay is a perfect 10 out of 10 if the prompt asks you to find flaws in it. So if you're asking for a direct analysis and comparison rather than grading each section, you'll have a much better tool that's not as potentially dangerous for a student or for yourself. Um,
And you brought that up in our conversation yesterday about comparing two programs for alignment, is that you have similarities and you have differences. And in many cases, the differences can be as or more interesting than the similarities.
I have a
Sean,
question for them.
I see. Lane, go for it.
Yeah, I was curious. I think, it's clear to me that these AI tools can be really constructive for students if they use them in that learning, paradigm that you're
Yeah.
talking about, and can potentially be very destructive if they use them for generating. I'm a computer science instructor,
Mhm.
and so as a learning teaching tool, phenomenal, and can also 100% completely short circuit their learning if they just use it for the, very foundational generation component.
Mhm.
And so something I'm really interested in is sort of this idea of what's the state of the art for restricting a language model so that it only acts in that sort of tutoring learning sense. And I don't have a sense of that at all. As an
Yeah.
instructor, can I expose a tutor that won't short circuit their studies? And just curious what you know about that.
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time both like creating kind of like fine-tuned models for like very specific tasks and also trying to break those models to see if I could get them to act outside of the parameters. You can break any model that you interact with, whether it's through prompt injection, digging around, trying to find the holes in its specifications. There's no perfect model that you can create that'll stick to exactly the boundaries that you set up for it. But with that being said, I think that if you wanted to set up something like a custom GPT, which they are very good for these kind of like very, very narrow tasks, in giving it in clear instructions of the level of the language, the level of understanding a student should have, maybe at each part of the course, and then having it specifically omit like completed generated code and only making comments on code provided to it. I think that could be a good like starting point for creating automated tutors, but especially in computer science or any profession that involves a lot of code, it's kind of the Stack Overflow gone pro, right? You're always going to have the problem of people looking for code that exists to find a problem that they're struggling with completing. And it's is there a pathway for making the learning that works for that person that is, if not easier, but more approachable than just taking the code or the example or the generative output wholesale and representing it as your own work, right? Because if you do the later, you might pass the assignment, but you're cheating yourself on what you're spending your time and your money on doing and learning the content. So like I use a lot of generative code in my work just because like I understand the problem, I understand the code. But if I'm trying to learn a new statistical method, if I'm trying to learn a new package, and I just have code generated for me, I'm not really learning the concept that I need to be understanding, right? So I'll often take the time in writing the manual code and having a package explained to me, but it's a really complex problem. I hopefully that at least somewhat answered your question.
Oh yeah, no, I have, one, I'm thinking about a prompt I'm going to be asking some tool out there, which is, okay, develop a roadmap for me for how to create a GPT, because I'm
Yeah.
still totally naive of how you actually, even if it's imperfect, how do you create boundaries and make one? And so
Yeah.
that's something I'll actively explore. But then, back to the difficulty of it, something I'm trying to explain to my students is at the fundamental level, like you're learning a new language. And so if you use an AI tool to like create, imagine you're learning Mandarin or Japanese and you're trying to
Yeah.
learn these characters. Like if you just ask the tool to make the characters for you and you never learn them, you can't build on that. And so it really is a very subtle request on the student's end to use it in one way and not another.
So I'm gonna not dig into this super, but to give you a starting point, if you go to create a custom GPT, you can give instructions, conversational starters, give like a knowledge base as a starting point. Very, very strongly suggest using this because it's so easy to set up, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with it. I do want to call Michael, and what have you got for me?
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Wonderful. I understand what you were demonstrating today, typing in prompts to the large language models, but you said you downloaded PDFs of the Foothill College catalog for dental hygiene. If you downloaded the PDFs, whether you had a hard copy or a digital copy, how did you get that information into the LLM to?
Oh, that's a great question. So, if I was a student, I'd probably do a little bit more uploading, but for this presentation, what I did is I went to print program map, and it gives me this outline of the courses. And then if I was doing this in earnest, what I would probably do is I would go to each of these courses, print out a PDF, and then go to ChatGPT, and then drag those PDFs into the chat field as context for the model. There are adjacent platforms like I think ChatGPT's Canvas, Notebook LM, where you can add supporting knowledge base documents that you can then create a prompt against those with those in the context of its memory.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Then in the questions that come out about rubrics, I think are especially interesting because students, if they're clever, will use a rubric to help understand an assignment, not just meet the quota for points, right? If a rubric is well constructed on our part, we want it to guide a student to particular learning goals. And this gets to maybe a little bit of attention. A student may want points, but if we flip the script on that and ask, here are 5 skills or 5 outcomes that we want from this assignment, think about these as you create your work product.
That's a great point. Rachel had a question. Is there a limit to the number of times you can attach files in the free ChatGPT version? I believe that I'm assuming that there is. I have not poked around the free ChatGPT in a while. I do think that Google's Notebook LM, you might be able to have a larger number of free documents that you can use, and I think the Gemini has the largest context window. So if you were looking for a fit that is the perfect intersection of free and also able to have a lot of text in context, you might want to look at Notebook LM and Gemini. Once you start using these for different workflows, you'll find pretty quickly that the different models have different strengths and weaknesses depending on the types of tasks that you want to work on them.
Yeah. I had a further comment, and it was a question that I was going to direct to Zach, as Zach and Sharon, who guide our AI learning community. It's really clear that prompting is part of learning and it's part of education, and it's really going to be part of the business that we're doing. And helping our colleagues understand these tricks without them feeling threatened or overwhelmed by technology, I think is going to be a trick, and it's going to be more than professional development. It's a lot of organizational change. But I'd like to throw out an idea, and I'm just very new to this, but incredibly impressed. Can we take our lectures and export pieces of them, align them with the slide deck that we're lecturing to, the activities that we're doing at a board, and maybe the voice to text transcription file, and have these tools create much more condensed snippets to help students go back and say, I can't bear to listen to 90 minutes of that lecture again, but maybe Notebook LM can create a 15-minute summary that really gives me the salient points. And if the instructor creates the learning objectives structured at the beginning of the lecture and a review at the end to help the model, can that help me be a better student with less time? Because that's really what our students lack.
I think that is a really, really good use case, but for any workflows that have multiple steps, multiple models working under the hood. The most important thing for the professor in this situation is to not just assume that everything is going to work smoothly on the first setup. If you go through for a few days or even a few weeks and it looks good, you might get to a point where you get to a lecture that kind of spirals out on one single topic with a lot of really nuanced details that
Yeah.
again might not be captured at one of those in-between steps. So again, like going over and reviewing the output, especially if people are depending on it for their own work or their own success, is really paramount for using these tools in kind of like a people-facing way.
Do you think maybe we identify students who we have their trust and we share with them, hey, we're trying to make this work. Can you be part of a small feedback group, right? So it's like a focus group. We're trying some stuff. Please give us your honest feedback, what worked and what didn't.
Well,
And
I
have
mean,
them
yeah.
be part of the process.
well, on
I-
that note, I think, right, like some of that effort could be done in our AI learning community, right? You're both part of it, and I think that is, um, we encourage people to join all the time because these are the sorts of discussions we have, right? We talk about the things that we like in AI, but we also talk about like the fears that we have with AI and the privacy concerns that we might have, all of the concerns we have, or just ideas we want to bounce off of each other. Right? That's what we do in the AI learning community. So I'm going to put the link for that in the chat, for those of you that are still here, just so you can take a look at it.
It's often every 2 weeks on Friday at 12 p.m.
And we'll be doing a better job of posting the upcoming meeting dates on the website. But if you have any questions, you can email myself, Zach. Our email is I'll put them in the chat.
Fantastic. Does anybody have any other questions? Any other
Yes,
other
sorry. What is happening this Friday again?
the AI learning community? It is at 12 p.m. on Friday.
Is that, can I come in Zoom?
Yeah, so we meet exclusively on Zoom. We put on workshops like this one. It's comprised of students, faculty, staff, community members. So it's open to anyone that wants to talk with us. And it rotates on the people that present. We're all active participants, and you get as much from it as you put into it. So you can participate a lot or just listen the whole time. It's totally up to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I am gonna be there. Aiden was asking. I am gonna be there on Friday. I am not Foothill faculty. I am an alumni. And I also briefly was a data analyst at Foothill. If I can, I can drop my LinkedIn in the chat if anyone wants to ask a follow-up question afterwards or wants guidance or resources for using these tools. Happy to help anyone, any folks who are interested in getting better at using these.
Ben, thank you for all that you shared and just the education that I've garnered with you in just a very short period of time. I hope everyone feels like this is a universe that may seem complicated, but as you learn these tools, they're designed to help people, right? They're not designed to be tricky or complicated. They're designed to help people, and that's what we do in education. We help people.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to say some people are afraid of AI.
Mhm.
and especially the next 5 years and how they will take jobs, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a really valid concern. I I think that with any new technology that comes out, there are definitely all kinds of growing pains, upsides, downsides, and I think that the most important thing is whether you're using these tools a lot or if you're not using these tools, it is important to understand how they work, their limitations, their capabilities, so that you can integrate them in the work that you do or work around them. I often will tell people that it's not so much AI that will take your job. It often is someone using AI who will take your job, or someone who understands how to use these tools to either improve their productivity, make them able to learn skills much faster, or everything in between.
Yeah.
It sounds like that we're heading towards it's more like um how the survival of the fittest is
Mhm.
like the more knowledgeable will be the fittest to survive in
One of the things that I really like about the kind of the surge and availability of these tools is I think that it makes higher learning and complex learning a lot more accessible to people that might
Yeah.
not have a really beefy computer to work on larger coding problems, who might not have either the transportation or the money or the time to attend higher ed or even community colleges. If you're just someone who's working two jobs and you want to spend an hour a day learning something that you're passionate about or something that you think will level up your skill in any area, you can use the free versions of all of these tools to create yourself a roadmap and start chipping away at it without having to pay any kind of fee or go through either the realized or perceived bureaucracy that might have been in the way for you before. If you're I was a disability student at Foothill when I came through. I had a lot of very great accommodations that I was able to take care of, or that I was able to leverage. And I think that these tools make some of those issues that people might have in similar situations easier to manage. I really struggled with note taking in a lot of my classes. And if I had the ability to just take the recording of a lecture and have it transcribed and summarized to me, I definitely would take advantage of that, especially in a remote class where you might just kind of zone out at a wall and not really absorb what's happening. Like the ability to use these to kind of shore up the gaps that you might have in your own either organization or day-to-day work. Like it's incredible.
yes, it sounds like it's an equalizer.
I it definitely has the potential to be, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Ben, you touched on one thing and a 1+1 that I think is really intriguing is that there are so many complex topics in the world today, especially topics that bridge more than one subject.
Mhm.
And language models that are current, and most are very current in their training and exposure, can distill this down. And again, in your prompt with context, direction, and intent, the model will speak to you. And we need to learn to come back and have a continuing dialogue with that model, that conversation building, right? And the model will really, I really do believe that models enjoy pleasing humans and they enjoy getting that alignment correct. I also wanted to share that there are students, and this is because of faculty, we're not perfect. A student can say, even without a disability, here's what my instructor is asking. What the heck do they really mean? Right? You need this translator. And that's going to help the student succeed. And the model will say, the instructor may mean this, right? Here's how you can respond.
I think that's a really good starting point for like potential dialogue between students and faculty. If
Mhm.
if as a professor, if you're finding that students are asking AI models, what does the professor actually mean? It might help to give kind of an expanded explanation for those patterns that come up. I think that what I'm hoping that people get from this is not just how to use these models, but also like how to talk about them across different disciplines between student and faculty. One thing that I use to get better at prompting were really old books about technical writing and expressive writing. Very, very often AI models are seen to be in the realm and behind the gates of computer science, but often the people who are the best at prompting and fine-tuning the prompts are the ones who have more language art skills, that have more skills in like being descriptive in the ideas that they're having or the conversations that they're talking about.
And that really gets down to, and I feel for my colleagues in language arts because it's easy to see some of these tools as really being a threat to their primary goal. I would respectfully suggest that for all of us, and maybe particularly for them, not only has the world of writing changed, but the skills that they can convey to students, just as you mentioned, Ben, to be able to express your ideas well, to ask good questions, to engage in a dialogue, and then reflect critically. We teach that nowhere else but in language arts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thought that AI is a search engine, but it's different for what you guys explained today.
Yeah. So the core of what a lot of these AI tools, I'll often use the term LLM for large language model. What they are at the very foundation is they are statistical models that predict the output given some kind of input. And it's kind of hard to fathom in the same realm as like how many stars are in our galaxy or the universe. You can see a number or like think about it, but it's hard to conceptualize because a lot of these models, the input they're taking is in the billions and billions of parameters. But the underlying thing that's going in is these numerical values for the tokens. So it's taking in input and predicting the output. What's the most likely thing that's going to come out? And with what a lot of models are doing with building in search into their output with ChatGPT is it's using a tool to perform a Google search, a Bing search, whatever provider they're using, to pull that data into its temporary memory, into its context window, and then to augment its output given this new information that's specific to the request. So often you can use these as search assistants, but the underlying model doesn't really have any current information. When I was researching for this, many of the AI or many of the open AI models are only trained on data up to 2023. So anything after 2023 is either given in augmentation or provided as extra context, either by the search function or whatever OpenAI has under the hood.
So I think my last question is like, but how do we know the accuracy of it and who's checking AI?
That's a very good question. So when I was going over the differences between learning and generating, one of the pitfalls that you'll come across, especially if you're using these tools in an area that you have a lot of domain knowledge, there will be errors. Often they're called hallucinations, where either the data that's generated is inaccurate or just entirely fictional, just wholesale. And one of the really important things is that if you're using this as generation, you want to have some base level of understanding of what it's outputting so that you can course correct the output, so that you're not putting your name on just hallucinated nonsense. And that, as a student or someone that's skill building, it's really important to approach it from a learning place rather than a place of just generating solutions, generating content, because you aren't going to be developing the muscle memory of understanding these concepts, and you might be using output that's just not true. There are a couple of tools. I really like Perplexity as a kind of AI augmented search engine. It does have sources for each of its like search results that it comes up with, and it's generally pretty spot on and hallucination minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Jeanette, I'd also suggest that we're living in a world, and this was our presentation about a month ago, where we're seeing such explosion of data that many people, academics especially, say, well, what about fact checking? And we're talking about structured data. As we have more unstructured data and more observations, I think that accuracy becomes, I don't know if that's the perfect measure. And we have observations and we create knowledge and knowledge graphs, connection between these observations. But we have to understand that as the world gets more complex, that accuracy, I think, changes shape. I just want to say that accuracy can be one perspective, right? And I'm not suggesting that there are alternative facts, but there are ways of interpretation, and for better and not just worse, that interpretation is not always the same. You look at the law, look at medicine, even look at scientific findings, right?
Hmm.
We have judgments, right?
Hmm.
Based upon
Interpretation.
we have our rubrics and our knowledge graphs, right? But I think what Ben brings up is there could be a flip side if we flip the script on accuracy and say, what other judgments might we have of this event? What other judgments might we have in other perspectives? And getting back to academia, this is what we want to inspire: critical thought and, difference, sharing difference and growing from it.
So I have a professional anecdote that I think is really good for this. So I was in a situation where an executive at my company that I work with very closely took some analysis that my team had given them, and they'd fed it through Claude and asked it to change the analysis and give it an output. And they presented the conclusion that Claude had come to, and it was different than what we had found. And so what I did is I took that output, I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, give me 5 reasons why the method of this analysis isn't appropriate for the outcome that it came to. And then it did, and I sent it right back to them. And I think it's important to look at that and understand a few things. One, you can direct the output of like a decision through an LLM or an AI tool in any way that you want. You can word it in a specific way to get to the outcome that you're looking for, if that's what you want to do. If you are using these tools in a professional setting, it is really important that you understand the output that you're asking for, and you're able to understand if it's accurate, and does this output fit the question and the context of the question? And if it doesn't, do I need to rework the prompt or just fine-tune the output it's giving me?
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's
Mhm.
when you want to generate something. It makes sense.
Yeah.
You would want to be a step ahead of the machine,
Yes. Yeah.
because I think somebody said to me, like, because I'm interested in becoming a CPA
Mhm.
in the future, and then said, well, what's the point of that? And then I guess somebody said to be a consultant, making the decisions,
Mhm.
helping people, and that might be so there's a need for human
Yes.
involvement. Somebody got to supervise, AI and all that. So
Just decision support. And Ben, you
Mhm.
shared yesterday your training in value, understanding value applications in computer science, and decision support is really at the top of that list. However that looks to you, it could be a business decision, it could be a legal decision, it could be a medical interpretation, right? It could be looking at science where you have contradictory data. And again, when we look at very, very complex fields in cancer and in medicine, we're just filled with complex data that may be incongruous at this moment. But if we change our perspective and look at different observation perspectives, how can we gain value from what appears to be incongruous?
I often hear from people in almost every my cat scared themselves. I hear from people in almost every field, like, I'm thinking about going into this field, or I'm thinking about going into this field, but I am having second thoughts because of AI. I would say that if you found something that you're interested in, that you're passionate in,
Yep.
just go for it, because either you're going to learn new tools that are AI based in that field to do things that you probably haven't thought of in this moment, or you're going to be in a position to fix the mistakes in the field that AI introduces. So if you're looking into going to be a CPA, maybe don't go to TurboTax, but go to the companies that are fixing the problems that arise with TurboTax implementing more AI into their automation. That is going to be across the board with any STEM related field, any non-STEM related field, everything in between.
Yeah.
You're saying go to the field that creates
Go to the field that you're interested in, that you're actually, like, you're interested in and passionate about, because I mean it's very, very hard to find that.
Yep. Passion and a commitment to providing value. Certainly in science and in chemistry, we're having these conversations, different conversations at different organizations, but data science is embedded in science, is embedded in chemistry. And a lot of people fear, well, I don't want to be a data scientist. I want to be a chemist. But to understand that chemists navigate complex fields of data and just how much richer and how much more value your work can provide when you can federate your work and combine it with other people's observations.
Mhm.
So basically, if I go to accounting, to make sure that I also know the technical part with AI.
Yeah, I don't think you need to, like, know it inside and out unless you want to, but just like having a foundational understanding of how to use these tools if you need to or if you want to, and then just poking around, like, new releases in that space every so often. That's what I would suggest, but I don't think that you need to spend an enormous amount of your time going into that profession using AI tools. I think it's much better spent learning the foundations of the profession itself, and then using the AI tools if you want to, or if you join a company and they have a suite of tools that they're using. There's very low expectation of you to be a data scientist in every field.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Wow, I learned so much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, of
And
course. I'm glad.
Sharon had to leave, and Zach has also left for another meeting. Do you want to do maybe a 1 minute summary and we can close out if there are
Yeah.
no other questions?
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else before we start to wrap up?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, the power
I'm
just
also
went out on
suggesting
campus.
this for the richness of our VTT file.
Yeah, so I sent these slides to Sharon, who I think is gonna to send it to anyone who joined the meeting. But just to summarize, I went over words versus tokens, the importance of understanding context window when working with these tools, going over the difference between zero shot prompting, one-offs, conversation building, kind of having a back and forth with these models, taking conversation building and creating a template that you can reuse either within the same model or a different model across different conversations. Then we talked about the importance of learning versus generating with using these tools, especially if you're trying to build skills or go towards a degree or just gain the muscle memory of working with these concepts. Then I went over a bit the more complex with time management tools, planning out how to use these tools to sketch out an entire pathway into a dental assistant program. And then we dug into how to use these tools in creating new habits and note taking, and a lot of really good conversation at the end of this. Again, there's the AI learning community tomorrow at 12. It often happens every other week on Friday at 12. And then I put my LinkedIn in chat. If anyone has any questions that come to them later or they didn't want to ask, feel free to connect with me there, and I'd be happy to help.
And in the conversations that Ben and I had in my parting comments, what I tell anyone coming to this field or how to use these tools is, in creating the question, context, direction, and intent. Who are you? What do you need and why? And do it in a way that is very humble. A learning model, a language model will never insult you. And also to understand that you're having a dialogue with a reasoning engine that's actually designed, and I'd even suggest maybe even rewarded for helping you. So it's designed to help you structure that question and just have a nice, thoughtful dialogue.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop